Saturday, April 25th on Paramount Plus.
I will be oiling up and fighting Shoga MMA.
Yeah, that's a great fight, Dana.
With the UFC White House card out of the way, we now have a full flow of goods. A full passage has now been cleared inside of the UFC. And with that clearing comes MMA announcements. And so today we have some amazing news. Today we will be breaking down the newly announced fights from the big bald man himself, and we will be discussing everything good and everything bad about them. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, don't forget to smack the shit out of the like button, and let's get into it. Now, when I heard the UFC was going live, I thought the UFC had heard our cries, heard our complaints, heard that we weren't fucking happy with the White House card. And well, I was wrong. Instead of a newly added White House card fight, we got around 10 or so fight announcements, which we will be going through soon. Now, these fights go from around March all the way to June. And they have fighters like Hamza, Jan Blachowicz, Arnold Allen, and even the Aussie Redeemer himself. But as I said, we will get into that later in the video. To start off this video, firstly, I want to explain why I feel like the UFC is no longer constipated. You see, I think that the UFC held up a lot of its fighters because of the White House card. I think they were dangling the carrot of the White House card in front of all of their favorite fighters. You know, so they could potentially pay fighters a smaller amount using exposure and the great opportunity that is the White House card almost as bait, almost as that carrot dangling in front of them. You'll be seen by millions. And I think they did this because imagine if any of their top tier fighters pulled out. They need people to quickly replace them. You must be ready. You can be seen by millions. I think it was a combination of this and not being able to tell many people that they have the potential to be on the White House card. Number one, they needed to make sure they were available for it, but number two, they couldn't go announcing the White House card to everyone because it's top secret. Or rather than that, the UFC is actually extremely smart, 10 million IQ. That was never their plan, and the announcing of all these recent fights is just to try get heat off of the White House card. Quickly announce those fights, quickly distract them. You know, angry fans like myself and probably you who thought that the UFC White House card was going to be bigger, they're now using these announcements as a distraction for us peanuts. And honestly, I think that's a smart play. And given this video title, it worked. Anyway, peanuts and peanuts, that's enough rambling. Let's get into the fight announcements themselves. The fucking hair here that's been pissing me off. Starting off in Las Vegas on April 25th, Aljamain Sterling versus Youssef Zalal. Now, recently I heard Aljo going off about how UFC fighters don't earn enough money and how the UFC seems to be always trying to set him up for a loss. You know, he's saying that every time he asks the UFC for a certain matchup, like, hey guys, give me a striker, please. The UFC is like, yep, okay, striker. No, you're getting Youssef Zalal, a dominant grappler. And now this fight does have a high potential to be a banger. Either that or a sloppy striking fest where not much happens. And Zalal may not be the most well-known man in the UFC, but for those who do know him, they know that he's a dominant grappler who is very well-rounded. And as you all know, Aljamain Sterling is basically the same thing. And that's why I feel like this fight has potential to be one of those fights where two amazing lighter weight grapplers go at it and they scramble, lots of submission attempts, lots of reversals. I feel like it has the potential to be one of those fights. Either that or it'll turn into a boring striking match. Now, I give Sterling the wrestling advantage in this fight, but in terms of being well-rounded, I feel like Zalal does pose a threat for him. Now, granted, he hasn't faced high-level competition like Sterling, but I would put my money on him training his ass off for this opportunity because a win over someone like Sterling gets you into the top of the rankings. Sterling's massive though, and he's not getting subbed, so I'm putting my money on him. Sterling by boring decision. Now to Perth. If I thought the May 2nd JDM card couldn't get any better, I'd be wrong. Because what's better than one goat on a Perth card in Australia? Two goats on a Perth card in Australia. Fuck, put Volkanovski on there and I might cream. I'm already creaming. I might cream twice. But creaming aside, besides some of the most scary matchmaking for Australians in JDM vs Prates, we actually get more of a nicer dream for the Redeemer. Now, Dariush is someone that I love, someone I think we all love, but putting him up against the Redeemer is very telling. Either Benil's manager hates him, or the UFC is trying to boost the Redeemer all the way up into the top of the rankings. Now, Beneil's chin is pretty sus. I feel like Quillen might knock him out at range with maybe a feint or potentially a jab. But what I would like to see from this fight is for Beneil to survive and really test Quillen. You know, I don't want Quillen going up the rankings too fast and being dominated by someone at the very top. I think he's an amazing prospect, but I just don't want to rush him too fast. I'd love to see some high-level exchanges of some grappling because I know that Quillen is well-rounded and I know that Dariush has high-level grappling. So hopefully we see a back and forth between them and then we see Beneil get slept. And it feels weird saying that about Beneil because I love Beneil, but the Aussie glaze will always prevail. And I'm not saying we're going to enjoy it, but me and my Australian friends here, we're going to enjoy it. Next, we have UFC 328, and we have 4 new fight announcements on this card alone. The first 2 being these 2 very polarizing characters. After that, we have Volkov versus Waldo. We have Jan versus Bogdan 2. And we also have King Bobby versus... who the fuck is that guy? Jeremy Stevens. Now, most of these fights are pretty except for the main event. I'm guessing the winner of Volkov and Waldo will probably fight the loser of Gane versus Pereira. Those 2 timelines seem to fit together pretty well, and I guess the winner of that after fight will then maybe fight for the belt after Tom comes back. Heavyweight division is a shit show, who really cares? Stevens versus the Bobster. Now, both of these guys are on similar paths. They're both unks inside the UFC, and I'm sure both of them are down for a stand-up fight. No one wants to grapple at that age. And I'm leaning towards Bobby in this one. You know, he's just come off of that knockout. He's feeling himself. He should be beaming with confidence. And I think after that last TKO win, he can put it over Stevens. Jan versus Bogdan 2. This is... who wants to see this fight a second time round? I really don't give a fuck about this fight. Last one was pretty average. Jan is definitely slowing down. He's at the tail end of his career. Look, he's still tough as hell. The last fight was still a stand-up fight, I guess. It wasn't like they got held down for 5 rounds. But it was just... I don't know why we're running it back. But now the real thing we want to talk about on this card. Strickland versus Hamza. Rest in peace, Imavov. You were in the Shadow Realm. No one cares. Maybe you can go fight like Hernandez for funsies. Either that or you can sit on the sideline. No one cares. Now this fight should be entertaining. And if it's not, at least we have the press conference. And look, I don't even really care for the fight. I don't want to get myself too excited for the fight because the same thing that happened with JDM and Islam or DDP and Hamzat, I don't want to be excited for that to happen again. I would prefer to go into this thinking that it's going to be a wrestling ragdoll and be extremely surprised rather than go in thinking, oh, I don't know, man. Strickland has good takedown defense. I don't know, man. Strickland has a good gas tank. I don't want to do any of that. Because if I have to sit there and watch someone be crucifixed for 5 rounds and held in half guard, I might just crash the fuck out. They're mixing the martial arts. No, that's only good when Charles is doing it. But in saying that, what we can get our hopes up for is the shit talk leading up to this fight. There's going to be politics, slandering, racism. Everything will not be spared for this fight. You know, we recently had Sean Strickland's microphone get cut. If Paramount thinks that that was some of the worst that could be said, shit's gonna hit the fan when they get him on the main stage of the press conference. Hell, I don't even know if they're gonna let this guy have a microphone. Now, before this fight, I think there's a high potential for a brawl. You know, I think that Sean Strickland plays up his character a lot, and I think that Hamzat plays up this cool, calm, collected character a lot. I think beneath that calmness of Hamzat Chimaev is a ticking time bomb, similar to like Arman Sarukian. I think if pushed that little bit too much, which Sean will probably do, I could see him crashing the fuck out and trying to fight him before the event. But then when he gets to the fight, I imagine he's going to be pinned down for 5 rounds and it's going to be a stinker. But let's hope I'm wrong. But one positive to come out of this is that Hamzat is actually fighting. I was about to make a video saying, where the fuck is Hamzat? Why isn't he fighting? And how he's not my favorite fighter anymore. But here we are, a Hamzat fight. Great. How about one more before the end of the year, hey brother? That was more like a retarded Max Holloway impression. May 16th, Arnold Allen versus Melquizai Costa. Is that how you say his name? I don't know. But I don't know who I would pick in this fight. Arnold Allen looks to be just below championship quality material. You know, I feel like he is right there. And Mel Costa he's great, but we haven't really seen him against higher level competition. I think we just saw him finish Dan Ige, which is right at the very entry level. Dan Ige is nowhere near an Arnold Allen. But I love this fight. I love that the division has finally been shaken up a little bit. You know, huge props to Allen to give Costa an opportunity like this. Not many people would fight down that much. And with a win over someone like Allen, Costa would be up there with the Gene Silvers of the world. And if we could see another highlight like that spinning back kick we just saw, cinema. Song Ding Dong versus Figueiredo. Honestly, we know this one will be a scrap, but is it okay to say I'm not that excited for it? You know, both of these guys in their last few performances have seen pretty, you know, they bring the fight, they're predominantly strikers, but they're just below that very top level of competition inside of their divisions. And I see what the UFC's doing here. You know, Song Ding Dong is huge for the China market. They want to do this fight in Macau. And they know that Figueiredo will probably be a challenging fight, but also a winnable fight. You know, they don't want to set up Song to lose in front of the hometown. But yeah, as I said, I'll still watch, but I just don't really care too much for it. Now on that same card, we have Zhang versus Manyfield, which I don't really want happening. You know, I met Manyfield and his wife back at UFC Perth, and they were some of the most lovely people I've ever met. So last thing I want to see is Manyfield get the Anthony Smith treatment. And I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to give Zhang a TKO in China in front of the mainland. But I'm hoping that Manyfield spoils that party. Please don't run into range again and get KO'd. Next we have Sergey Pavlovich versus Talison Teixeira. I think Talison gets whomped here. And man, I miss when Sergey was one of the scariest people in this division. But still, Teixeira looked ass in that last performance. I think he fought a fat Tuivasa. That was a horrible fight. If Pavlovich opens up, he wins this one easily. And finally, the last announcement of this video. Bilal Muhammad versus Gabriel Bonfim. This one is... the UFC hates Bilal. Look, I'm not the biggest Bilal fan. I was very happy to watch JDM beat the shit out of him. But Gabriel Bonfim has seemed to be given the easiest layup competition, and he's extremely favored for some reason by the UFC. He's not that amazing, and I really don't think he's on Bilal's level. Now, yes, the fighters that Bonfim had beaten were pretty well-known names. You know, they weren't nobodies, but I wouldn't say that they were at their peaks of their career. And I think it's a bit of a mistake to throw him up to Bilal. Great opportunity for Bonfim, but Bilal is still right there. It's just that welterweight is so stacked that you forget how good Bilal is. You know, there was a period there where I felt like no one beats Bilal until JDM did it. But that doesn't mean Bilal's crap. That just means the JDM and him are that good. And as I said, I think it's a mistake to throw him up there to Bilal. I think his pressure and I think his wrestling are going to absolutely melt him. Now, that is, of course, if his confidence hasn't been beaten down by losing to Ian Gary. God, that would fucking suck. I've gone out there and beaten Bilal. Fuck, does anyone like Ian Gary? His voice. God, I hope my voice doesn't sound like that to some people. I've gone out there. And with that last fight, the UFC is no longer constipated. Now, this year, I thought being the year of Paramount was going to be more, you know, more girthy, as Che would say. I just thought the UFC this year would try put on more of an effort to have huge superstar level fights. And I guess that's having too high expectations as a UFC fan. We still have banger fights coming up. We've got the Yuri Light Heavyweight Championship reign coming. We've still got International Fight Week to be announced. JDM Prates, Ilya's returning. There's so many great fights. I feel sometimes it's just easy to get bogged down in some of these shitter ones. Life's good, boys. We should do our best to be happy. I guess when we have weekends like this, it starts to get a little bit dark and gloomy. But we're eating good, fellas. Life is good. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you staying to the end and supporting me. If you enjoy these videos, let me know down below that you enjoy them. Don't forget to smack the shit out of the like and subscribe button. Do that so I can quit my job and do this full time. Please, goddamn. My lower back is dying. Other than that, click one of these videos here, wherever I put it, and I will see you all next week for a new video. Peace out. Love you.